In early February 1995, the Welsh musician Richie Edwards disappeared. Richie was known as the rhythm guitarist and principal lyricist for the band the Manic Street Preachers. His songs mixed political anger with expressions of deep emotional pain, and his imagery was by turns beautiful and horrific, in a way that might recall the poetry of Sylvia Plath. After his disappearance, Richie's car was found parked near Severn Bridge. This is an impressive suspension bridge, visible for miles around, which marks the symbolic borderland between England and Wales. It is also a structure from which many people have chosen to fall. I have never been able to cross from England to Wales or back without thinking of Richie. This is the opening of a text called Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky, which I contributed to a art photography book by Charlie Hay, the Swedish photographer who has taken pictures of locations where people have chosen to die, including this image from Tromsø, the town where I live. If you're interested to read this book, I'll link to a place where you can buy it in the description. I don't get any commission. I got a flat fee for the text, but I'm very proud of it. Check it out if you're interested. The reason I read this to you now is because the album we're going to talk about today is the album that the Manic Street Preachers made in the aftermath of this extremely tragic and defining event for them personally and for their career. Welcome to Tromsø Twilight. My name is Vincent, and I am doing a series called Remembering, where I'm talking about albums from 1996, 30 years later, in 2026. This is an album I bought when it was released. I'm going to be talking about Everything Must Go by the Manic Street Preachers, which was released in May 1996. So a little bit of context for those who don't really know the band. As I mentioned in the introductory paragraph that I read, Richie was one of the principal lyricists for the band, together with Nicky Wire, the bass player, and Richie's influence was very strong, especially on the aesthetics and the style and the kind of pose of the band, particularly on the 1994 album, The Holy Bible, which is very dark, brooding, painful. It's a very disturbing album, both sonically and lyrically. When he tragically disappeared, the band were faced with the possibility of stopping or continuing. They decided to continue as a three-piece. James Dean Bradfield, together, who's the vocalist, together with his cousin Sean Moore, who's the drummer, they always kind of made most of the music. Bradfield writes all the chords and the melodies. He used some of Richie's existing writing together with new lyrics by Nicky Wire, and they made this album, Everything Must Go. And even in the title, the album was kind of about moving on or facing the future. Now, what I do when I talk about these albums from 96 is I go through the tracks on the album and I talk about my opinion of these tracks, describe them a little bit, and try to decide whether or not they stand up or how they sound today. This album is enormously nostalgic for me. It was at a time when I was kind of learning to write songs, and I was very inspired by the Manic Street Preachers at the time. I liked them probably more than I liked a lot of the Britpop stuff that was going on concurrently. I think because they always seemed to be about something. They were about more than just kind of their own lives. They were about literature, culture, politics, and even Richie's writing about his own individual personal pain was often done metaphorically through other stories, as I will describe when I'm talking about this album. The album opens with Elvis impersonator Blackpool Pier, which is a co-written song lyrically between Nicky Wire and Richie Edwards. It's a description of Blackpool, a holiday spot in the UK, and somebody performing, impersonating Elvis, but it's taking this as a critique of the Americanization of the United Kingdom, a theme that has only become more relevant with time. It starts with quite a spacey and simple sound, and then it explodes when it gets into the chorus sonically. I think it's a great opener. It's quite a simple song, but it really is effective and still very exciting to me when I hear it today. The second track, A Design for Life, was the big single from this album. There are not a whole lot of big massive successful rock songs in 6/8 time, if you really begin to think about it. Most really big rock singles are in 4/4. A Design for Life has this 6/8 kind of swing to it that I absolutely love. But the thing about A Design for Life as well is that it was a hugely anthemic, massive single, like radio play on the single charts. And the lyrics are all about the way the working class of the United Kingdom are patronised by politicians, by newspapers, and by the very cultural institutions like the BBC that were playing this single. It describes wishing that the narrator would have glass marks in his face from a broken bottle so that he would be able to show his working class heritage, because the working class environments that both Nicky Wire and myself grew up in are potentially quite violent. And it also has this chorus about how we don't talk about love, we only want to get drunk. It's the way that the people of the United Kingdom are sold this incredible poverty of ambition and patronised. And this song still can bring tears to my eyes. I think it's very powerful. It's the first time that we heard the Manic Street Preachers use kind of strings and synthesizers in the way that they were doing. Later on, I found this sound to become less enjoyable, like on the subsequent record. But on Design for Life, I think that this sort of sweeping orchestration on the track is just so effective and beautiful. The third track, Kevin Carter, instrumentally, musically, it almost sounds like a post-punk take on a spy movie theme. And Kevin Carter was a photographer, so I think that's sort of what James Dean Bradfield was going for. You can almost imagine this sort of throwback 60s montage of a guy taking photographs. But the lyric that Richie has written for this song is about somebody who has become traumatized through what he's seen. He's taken all these pictures of war and poverty, and he's seen too much of the world to be able to survive it. I really think that this song is sort of one of the examples of Richie Edwards writing an autobiographical song through the story of another artist or another creative person. And it has as well just great vocals from James Dean Bradfield, and Sean Moore, the drummer, also plays trumpet on the track. I really think the first 3 tracks on this album, impeccable opening for a record. Enola Alone, the 4th track, is closer to the Britpop sound of the time, a kind of rock, pop, slightly anthemic kind of track. It has some very moving lines in the lyrics, in the context of the story of the band at the time. You know, he talks about he just wants to live no matter how miserable it is. And also, you don't want to read too much into it necessarily, but I think Nicky Wire is expressing a feeling of loneliness when his kindred spirit, his closest friend, is no longer with him. Unfortunately for me personally, the style of the music on this track, this kind of rock Britpop style, has dated more, so it's not a track I would return to as much. Everything Must Go, the 5th track, is like the sister song to A Design for Life, and it was also a big single. It has very few lyrics, it's very orchestral, it's very anthemic. I think it's dated more than A Design for Life, but I also think, who sounds like this? Like, that song is just uniquely the Manic Street Preachers in '96. I don't think it sounds like anybody else. And it has this kind of yearning melancholy that makes sense of the almost pompous style of the music. Again, I think they kind of lost this on the next album, where they were still using a lot of these kind of anthemic sounds, but it didn't have quite the same emotional impact. So Everything Must Go, I think it's a great title track, but it's followed by Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky, which I think arguably is one of the best Manic Street Preachers songs ever. It's very unlike a lot of the rest of the album. It has harp playing on it, and if you know about Wales and Welsh culture, you'll know that harp is an instrument that you often see in Wales. I used to know a girl who played harp in a hotel in Wales. It's a kind of local folk instrument. So it has this haunting harp line in it, which is in counterpoint to James Dean Bradfield's acoustic guitar. Bradfield is singing a lyric by Richie Edwards that describes animals in captivity. I believe it's about a gorilla, but there's also reference to a tail in the end, so it might be several animals. But it's written in the most poetic register, describing, the zookeeper as a warden, Christ-like figure, talking about the harvesting of ovaries and being bred into captivity, wishing to escape. I think this is genuinely an expression of a very empathic, sensitive person's pain and horror at seeing animals in captivity. I also think it's an expression from a person who's come to a point in his life where he feels trapped, he feels enclosed. The track after this, The Girl Who Wanted to Be God, I remember reading a Sylvia Plath biography around the same time that this came out, which was called The Girl Who Wanted to Be God. So definitely a reference to Sylvia Plath. It seems to be describing the life of a woman. The lyric writing is pretty decent. I do not like the sonics of this song, and actually it's one of two that I never really liked. It's a sort of anthemic pop, slightly disco influenced sound that they would return to later on in their career. This track just sonically isn't for me, and I think that it sounds very of its time. In fact, it almost sounds like the Lightning Seeds. I do imagine that many fans probably like it because it's one of the tracks that Edwards contributed lyrics to, but for me it's a low point on the album. It's followed by Removables, which is another Edwards lyric, and the music on this one is kind of stripped down. It's got acoustic guitar in the verse, electric comes in on the chorus. This is Edwards at his most oblique lyric writing, almost in the same kind of register as some of Kurt Cobain's writing on In Utero, for example. And to me, this track is great. It's sort of like an alternative route the Manic Street Preachers could have taken after the Holy Bible, where they weren't quite so heavy and so edgy sounding, but they also weren't leaning into this kind of anthemic pop. Unfortunately, the 9th track, Australia, is not a song that I enjoy. I don't think it's interesting lyrically, really. It's about Wire being travel sick and not liking being on aeroplanes. Sonics of the song don't make any sense with the content of the lyric, but also the sonics of the song, to me, are quite obnoxious. I remember reading an interview with James Dean Bradfield, who was a big fan of football, soccer as Americans call it, who said that he wanted the music to sound like the type of thing that they would show behind montage footage of people scoring goals. And I do think that it actually maybe was used for that eventually on Match of the Day in the UK. There is another thing that the Manic Street Preachers do that I don't really like, is that they use this rhythm quite often. And this is an egregious example of that. So sorry if you like Australia. To me, it drags the end of the album down. However, the following track, track 10, Interiors, is as good a song as the Manic Street Preachers have ever done. It's got this great bass riff through the verses with these guitar stabs. It sounds very classy and cool. And the lyrics are about Willem de Kooning, the abstract painter, and about his descent into Alzheimer's and how he couldn't recognize his own work. And I just think about the Manic Street Preachers, I feel so grateful to them that when I was a teenager, they were writing songs about Sylvia Plath and Kevin Carter and Willem de Kooning, and saying to people, who were into rock music, that there were interesting cultural references outside of what you would find in your local music magazine. This song also has an incredibly beautiful bridge that's sort of like a heavier version of Pulp, but with these great backing vocals. There's something sort of majestic about it that in some strange way in my mind kind of connects the paintings of de Kooning with his sort of confusion. I don't know, it's hard for me to explain what I mean by that, but if you listen to the track, it's like it's really created with both sadness and love. Now, track 11, Further Away, I don't have a lot to say about it. I don't really like it very much, and I don't enjoy criticizing things that other people enjoy, so I don't want to get too much into why I don't like it. But I will say that it's a kind of pretty standard rock song in its sound. They're using that rhythm again that bugs me, and the lyrics are not up to the standards, in my opinion, of a lot of Manic Street Preachers stuff. It reads a bit banal. The last track, No Surface, All Feeling, is arguably in the same sonic space. It's an alternative rock track, but to me it's significantly more effective than Further Away. It's a bit slower. The lyrics are more reflective, And the guitars sound more anthemic, they sound more monumental. It's almost like a wall of sound when all the guitars are really kicking in. It's also very emotional for a variety of reasons. It seems to be reflecting around their status in their life, both at their age and having lost their friend and not wanting just to look back at their career, but being focused on moving forward. And although it's written by Nicky Wyatt, it has Richie Edwards playing electric guitar on it, which is one of only two occasions he ever actually recorded guitar for the band. And also in '96, I was very susceptible to this kind of slightly melancholic rock music. So when I hear it now as an adult and it still stands up, it doesn't sound as dated as a couple of the others that I mentioned, I can still get very emotional listening to it. So that's me remembering Everything Must Go by Manic Street Preachers. To me, they really found a sound that worked well for them on this album. It's eclectic, but of a piece. James Dean Bradfield's singing is fantastic. He's doing some great solos on it. There's a lot of chemistry in the band. It's a very defiant, creative moment for them. And personally, one of my two favourites by the band. I remember being a teenager in my hometown, Swindon, and being served alcohol in some pubs that were not particularly careful about their licensing, and listening to Manic Street Preachers on the jukebox. And there's something both melancholic but aspirational about their music from that time. It's like you can be a working class but bookish person who is seeking something else but still attached to where you come from. And for that, I'm always grateful to them. I think musically, well over half the album still stands up. So check them out if you haven't heard it. If you do know it and have a relationship to it, please let me know in the comments what you thought about it and what you think of my memories. And thanks very much for now. I'll see you again soon.